Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a great pleasure to be here and to see these incredible pictures and stories that we've just witnessed right now. Before I show any real body of work, I should probably get something out there. People have often asked me, how come someone who looks like you, who comes from a suburban background outside of Dallas, Texas, why have you covered immigration for the last 15 years? And what's your deal? And I've sometimes stumbled to answer that question. But I think it really comes down to my first job. After having spent, well, 5.5 years here at the University of Texas, I think I still have the record of 11 semesters on the Daily Texan. I hope it's still the record. I was given a job by the Associated Press to work in Nicaragua. And so I started in that country very soon after many of the wars in Central America had ended during the 80s. And so you had a whole generation of photojournalists who'd spent the meat of their careers working in Guatemala and Nicaragua and El Salvador and Honduras and Costa Rica, everywhere in that part of the world, telling amazing stories. And they were frankly done with that story. They were exhausted, they were leaving, which left a little room for someone like myself who had had experience with internships and experience at a college newspaper, albeit a very good one, but not in the real world. And I had an amazing introduction to the profession, and I learned the reasons why so many people leave it all behind in the attempt to find a better life. Now, in the image you see here, these are Haitians and Venezuelans making their way through the Darien Gap. Some of you have heard of that place. It's the one place along the entire network of the Pan American Highway, which actually has no highway. And people have to hike and walk. And I can tell you this, I did it twice. I could only go on the Colombian side up to the Panamanian border because after that, it was just too dangerous for me with my cameras. Everything we do in this profession when you're working in hostile environments is a give and take with risk and reward. And at some point, you have to make tough decisions. But I can tell you this, walking against the current and up a mountain of mud all day long was something I hadn't trained for. And so at the end of the day, I was there with the pregnant ladies in the very back. This image here is from the Tohono O'odham Native American reservation, a nation there in Arizona, which has a huge amount of space there on the Mexican border. This picture was taken a while ago, but still, there's not a giant wall there, fence wall, whatever you want to call it, there in that nation because they don't want to have it. This is more of a vehicle barrier which stretches across that great piece of the Sonoran Desert. And this is a Border Patrol agent trying to tackle someone. I have to assume that he was a smuggler and not an immigrant because this agent was not successful. He fell into that thorn bush, and it took another 3 agents before they finally captured this fellow, which probably means he was a smuggler because he was really trying to get away. And this little boy was in detention center in McAllen, Texas. Now, many of you became familiar with this site, at least the place. That chain link fence became known in the undocumented immigrant community as they called it La Perrera, which means the dog kennel, because of that chain link fencing. Many people were detained there during the first Trump administration. This particular picture came from the Obama administration, back when families started coming across en masse back in 2014. And this picture is much more recent. These are Chinese immigrants having just come across from Mexico, from the Tecate area of northwestern Mexico into Southern California, a very remote part of Southern. You don't think of Southern California as having remote places, but they do. And a wonderful humanitarian worker had just passed out ponchos to these migrants who were burning used clothing and garbage, a lot of it plastic, to keep warm. And some of you have seen this picture. This was taken back in 2018. It became known as Crying Girl on the Border. And at the time, I did not know this little girl's name, Yanela Sanchez and her mother, Sandra. I had spoken with the mom before the picture was taken, but like, you know, when you're photographing people in the middle of the night and you're trying desperately just to get it in focus, sometimes there's less time for interviews than you would like. And so I talk to people in as much as they can feel comfortable with my presence. I always want people, especially in vulnerable conditions and situations, to understand that I'm not one of the agents. I'm not a federal officer. I'm media. And that gives them a chance to tell me not to take their picture, because if they think that I'm an agent, they know they have no choice. And so part of what we do is not always written consent every time. It's almost never written consent, but there's some sort of consent that we try to get with people, whether it's the look in their eye or whether they turn away from the camera. You can tell if people want you to go away. And so sometimes that's the way we operate. And I later came to know their names, and this picture became such a viral image during that time of zero tolerance in the first Trump administration that I kept up with this family and I've kept in touch. In fact, this is actually new, I just was in touch with Sandra, the mother, a couple hours ago, and I'll be leaving for North Carolina tomorrow to do a follow-up story with this family. Thank you. As some of you may have heard, the Trump administration has launched a major operation with ICE and Border Patrol in Charlotte, North Carolina, just this very weekend. So I'll be working on that too. Now, as we know, look, we're all aware of the politics involved, which resulted in the last election, and images like this, not images like this, realities like this had something to do with that. And part of what I do in this profession is I'm not an activist. I'm a photojournalist, and I try to tell as many different parts of the story as I can. And some of them, one side of the story is really excited about, and the other hates, and vice versa, I can tell you. Now, I'm gonna show you one story, as you've heard, that hasn't been seen before. It was just released by Getty Images this last week, and this is the first time I've presented it. As part of this phenomenon that we have happening in the United States right now, it's very difficult for photojournalists to cover this story. There's so many people suffering, living in incredible fear, like here in Danbury, Connecticut, where this picture was taken. Like Andrea and her young 7-month daughter who was born in the United States, Chanel. Her husband, this child's father, had been deported about 6 weeks before. And she made the very difficult decision to self-deport with her 2 daughters and a cousin and her son who are living with her in the same residence. And it's so difficult for any of us here who photograph immigration issues to cover the story because people are so afraid. And the last thing that any of us wants to do in telling that story and using our skills of getting access into difficult situations, using those skills, taking great pictures, and then have that person deported or worse, imprisoned because they allowed you into their lives. So it's very, very tricky. One way that I found to tell part of the story, not the entire story by any means, is to find a family who was planning on leaving, who had just had enough. And now, it was certainly not my intention to prove that the Trump administration's tactics are working. But I think it's fair to say that it's happening with thousands of people, and that is part of the story. The administration claims that it's 2 million people. I don't know any serious journalist or anyone involved in the story that believes that it's that many. But there are many people who are deciding to leave because it's just too hard. And in fact, it was harder for this family because they came up without passports. So it's fine to say, okay, you can leave now. But it's not so simple. You have to have travel documents in order to be able to go home. And it was very hard for her to get documents for her children. Why is that? Well, one of the kids' father was estranged back in Ecuador. didn't want to have anything to do with signing documents, notarized documents, and getting a passport. He tried to extort her for money so that she could just come home with her daughters. Ultimately, they resolved that. And you guys may be familiar with certain groups, maybe here in Austin and in different parts of the country, that have stepped up, humanitarian aid organizations that have stepped up to help people out. And this group helped them with logistics. They paid for their air tickets and for a massive amount of extra luggage because, you've got kids and you got to have clothes for them. And they didn't want to throw those things away. And so I traveled with this family back on the flight just about 10 days ago to Ecuador. And so I show what's happening on the US side, and then the reunion with her husband, Jorge, there in Quito, where they live, where he got to see his 7-month daughter for the first time in 3 months. I should mention, when he was in detention, the government put him through, I think, 5 different detention facilities, in fact, prisons, and they mixed the immigrants with Gen Pop. So these guys were with hardened criminals who were stealing his food, in fact. And the reunion was really amazing to see. And I'm so grateful that I've worked with so many people, not just immigrants, but certainly immigrants as well, who have allowed me into their lives, this family especially. And I keep in touch with them. They understood the importance of showing what was happening. Not everyone understands that. And so there's very few people we can photograph to tell the story, and you hope that some of those who actually give us access to their lives, they understand that some good can come of what we do in educating the public. Look, as photojournalists, we're always trying to have an impact. We hope that our pictures might change policy. We hope that pictures will educate people. And sometimes after all that work, we end up disappointed because we don't always get the results that we want. But I think in what we do, it's an accumulative effect, with photojournalists trying to tell the truth and shine the light. And over time, what we do makes a difference. And we have to hold on to that. And thank you all for being here.